Welcome to Theme Weavers, your weekly wisdom for weaving yoga themes into your classes to inspire your students. I'm your host, Heidi Kasner. Let's get started. Welcome, Theme Weavers. Today we're going to look at how to deliver a Dharma talk and weave the theme of the myth of Vishnu's fish. And this myth teaches us to trust in the guidance and remain adaptable throughout all of the different things that life throws our way. In case this is the first episode that you're listening to, please go back and check out Season 1, Episode 2 of the podcast for details on the background and structure of how am I to weave themes through your yoga classes. Every episode, I try and break down a new theme for you to use in your classes as inspiration for you and your students. If you're not a yoga teacher, these are still fun episodes to listen to if you enjoy the yoga practice, because every episode you can still deepen your knowledge of yoga theming and yoga philosophy, and this season with mythology, to help you tap into more of your practice beyond the asana, beyond the postures. And if you do choose to use today's teaching on the myth of Vishnu's fish, then please try and find a way to turn my voice into your own. I want you to be able to deliver themes that are authentic to you specifically in your own style of speaking. And just a few little housekeeping items to bring up before I get into today's episode. I'll try and be really fast. Every time that you leave feedback for me about the podcast or about episodes or comments or rate the podcast with 5 stars, please 5 stars, or reach out on Instagram or Facebook or send me an email directly, it just means the world. You know, I'm doing this podcast because I am really passionate about teaching beyond the asana, beyond the postures, and a huge part of my dharma, my purpose in life, is to connect with community. So when you reach out, it makes me feel connected rather than sitting alone in my closet. So thank you. And if you are so inclined to subscribe for a small monthly fee to the podcast, you can do that through Spotify, which both is a way of saying thank you for the time and energy that I put into this. So thank you if you already do subscribe. And if you're a chromatic yoga teacher, especially, if you subscribe to the podcast as a paid subscriber, you're allowed to use your listening hours to be tracked as continuing education to make your way along the chromatic trajectory. So if you have any questions about that, you can drop me a line at theweaverspodcast@gmail.com, and I'm happy to help answer any questions that you might have. But it's a pretty cool way of short continuing education toward the heart, the philosophy, and it's pretty awesome. And 2 pieces of exciting news for me. Theme Weavers Academy officially launched. Thank you so much for those of you who've already signed up. It's really exciting for me. It's a really quick, practical course to help you craft impactful yoga classes with confidence and creativity. The link to sign up is in the show notes. And I'm really proud of the course because so many people tell me that they come out of teacher training and that they really just don't feel prepared on how to theme their classes, and they want to create a really impactful experience for their students, but they don't actually know how to do that. And so, you read all the books, you do all the things, and you still feel a little bit lost. So this course is meant to be really fast, so that way by the time you're finished with it, you can confidently at least have one class theme written and ready to go that you can finesse over time, and also gives you all the skills to do that as many times as you want. You can repeat it over and over and go through it in order to help you feel confident in your theming and how to inspire your students in the way that I'm sure that you've been inspired by your own teachers over time. So really excited for those of you who already signed up. If you haven't, check it out. Links in the show notes. And I also read a book. I don't know if you know this. I'm really pumped about it. It's called Energize Your Life. It's a chakra workbook for personal transformation. You can visit my website at heidikasneryoga.com/chakra book for details, and the link's also in the show notes too. It's a really nice book, and it can help you even with your theming and your own exploration into your own chakra and energy system. All right, so let's dive into today's episode, all about Vishnu's fish. So gather around, yoga story time. So today I want to share with you that this is how I deliver the Dharma talk about the myth of Vishnu's fish. And the name of Vishnu's fish is Matsya, and it's actually one of Vishnu's 10 incarnations. And the story is all about trust, adaptability, and guidance throughout all the uncertainties that come our way in life. And really quick, just as a reminder, Vishnu is a Hindu god who is known as the preserver of the Dharma. He's one of the three gods in the Hindu Trinity, along with Brahma, the creator, and Shiva, the destroyer. So you hear about these different gods throughout different myths this season. All right, back to this story, though, specifically. So the myth begins with a character named Manu, who is the first human and the ancestor of all of humanity. And one day, while bathing in a river, Manu caught a small, adorable little fish in his hands. And to his surprise, the fish spoke, and it pleaded for protection. It promised that in return for protection, it would help Manu in a great time of need. Manu was compassionate and he was really curious, so he agreed and he placed the fish in a jar. So the fish began to grow rapidly. It outgrew the jar. So then he put it in a pond and it outgrew the pond. And then it outgrew the pond. So he put it in a lake and it outgrew the lake. And then finally the ocean itself he was put into and he outgrew the ocean. So Manu at this point realized it was not an ordinary fish. It was Matsya, an incarnation of Vishnu. Matsya warned Manu of an impending flood that would engulf the world, and he told him to build a large boat to save himself, to save the sacred texts, and to save the seeds of life. So when the flood arrived, Manu climbed aboard the boat. Matsya returned, now a super giant fish, right? He's bigger than the ocean, and guided the boat through the stormy waters, ensuring Manu's survival and the preservation of human life. At its core, this story is about navigating the unknown. Right. I think most of us have heard iterations of this story, whether it's this one, whether it's Noah and the ark, right? There's all these stories and different lineages that try and get us to navigate what's unknown in life, what's going to happen. Because life, much like Manu's journey, is full of unexpected storms and challenges that come our way. Matsya represents the guidance that emerges when we trust and adapt, reminding us that even in the chaos of our lives, there's always wisdom to be found. In our lives today, this might look like facing an uncertain future, right? I'm recording this in my closet in 2025, and there are certainly many uncertain things about my future, whether it is, something big like I've talked about on this podcast before that my son had open heart surgery as an infant, and he still has different congenital heart defects and newer defects that have formed. So his future is uncertain in terms of when and if he'll need another open heart surgery. I have no idea what that's going to look like, and it might never even happen. There's uncertainties in our future, like our jobs, right? Maybe it's starting a new job. Maybe it's dealing with a relationship ending, or my co-host on the podcast and that relationship ending, or navigating a health challenge. Like I said, when we get, flooded with these unexpected things that can happen to us, it can become really easy to get overwhelmed. I am the queen of getting overwhelmed when life is uncertain. But this myth teaches us that if we trust our own inner guidance, right, our intuition, and we remain adaptable, knowing that the storms eventually pass and bring opportunities for growth. And it's so funny. My mom always says, Heidi has to have a plan. The plan can change, but she must always have a plan, right? So these storms of life can mess with my plans, and I can resist and fight them and then usually suffer. Or I can see that these storms of life change my plans and give me opportunities for growth. So it's really the mindset that we use when we're looking at the shakeup of what's happening for us. So as we move through our movement practice, our postures, our asana practice today, let the story of Matsya guide you. You can think of each pose as a boat carrying you through the challenges of life. You can trust your breath as the current and allow it to steady you when the waters feel rough. Notice how balance, strength, and surrender have to work together, just as they did for Manu when he was faced with this uncertain future with needing to build a boat to make it through and continue with humanity. So that's my Dharma talk. It's really about the fact, in my mind, just to sum it up in like a very conversational way, it's really about the fact, the lesson of this story, whether it's this version of it with Vishnu's fish, Vishnu as a fish, or Noah and flood and the ark, whatever iteration of this story, really it's about the fact that stuff's going to get thrown at us in our life, and it's going to make us really uncomfortable, and it can make us suffer. Now we can resist that stuff coming our way, and that can create anxiety, it can create depression, it can create overwhelm, it can create just daily stress. Or we can recognize that when this stuff comes our way, if we stop fighting it and we craft our own way of flowing with what comes, we can trust that we're going to come out on the other side. Maybe not unscathed, but we'll still come out on the other side, experiencing some sort of lesson throughout the process. And sometimes that lesson can take forever to figure out, but there's still something always waiting for us to learn, to grow, to accomplish, right? So I've talked in the past, and this is sort of a little bit of a segue, but on past episodes, we talked about the Yoga Sutra that talks about not suffering twice. So when life throws us these moments of giving us not what we expected or what we planned for, and then we sit there and we stress about what might come next, and we become overwhelmed, or we've, fight, flight, freeze, whatever it is. We're suffering in that moment about something that might even be better than where we were, right? When your plans get thrown a wrench into them and you suffer about the what ifs of what's going to come, maybe what's going to come never actually happens that way, and something even more powerful happens. So, like, even with this podcast, for example, when Farron decided to not be a part of it anymore, I started being like, maybe people aren't going to want to listen to it if it's just me. Maybe they're going to find me boring. Maybe they're going to only have been listening to the podcast because of Farron, or maybe I'm not going to do a good job editing and all the parts that Farron was doing. And what if? And I was a little bit stuck for a little bit of time. And then I realized I could build a boat and just go for it and see what happens. I said to my husband, this could be a really amazing opportunity for me to grow and get creative in ways that I wasn't already, because I felt like I fit a role. Or it could suck and I don't have to do it anymore, but I can try. And so far, since I've started doing it on my own, I've absolutely loved it. I feel a little bit more in control. I like to be in control. It kind of works for me. I feel like I can believe in myself a little bit more. I'm sure that you've heard I tended to play the role of the person who's not good at Sanskrit, or who doesn't study language in the way that Theron did. And I can learn, I can do better, or I can just show up as my authentic self who's struggling with it, because I'm sure if you're a yoga teacher, you also probably struggle with it. So I can stand on my own power and my knowledge and be proud of myself. I don't mean to talk about myself for that long, but I just sort of wanted to segue a little bit into the fact that when we try and resist the curveballs that gets thrown at us, we tend to suffer. But when we can flow with it and see what happens, then we can grow, maybe. Or maybe it doesn't work, and that's okay too, but at least we're trying. One more example, because sometimes it's fun giving examples. Years ago, okay, so you've probably heard I love the band Fish. If you don't know them, they're a jam band from Vermont. And my husband and I are huge fans. I've been going since I was in middle school. Huge part of my community, a huge part of what brings me joy. And now it brings my husband and I joy together. And I was the age, when I started listening to them and people were going to festivals that they were throwing, I was too young. My parents would never let, a 16-year-old go to a festival at the time. My parents wouldn't, at least. And then when I was in college, when I would have done things like that, they were on a break. So I never really got to go to one of their festivals. And I always felt so sad. Everybody else did, but I didn't get to go, but whatever. And then there was a festival that was going to happen. I don't know. Was it 8 years ago by now? I forget when it was going to be. Now I even forget what it was called. But essentially, John and I rented because in my head I call it the curveball. That's not what it's called. But John and I, we were so excited. We ended up getting the RV passes instead of the camping passes. And we got Glen Close, which is the real area that's closest to the state. It was everything was lining up perfectly. We pick up from, oh my God, what was the name of the rental company? I don't know, it's RV America. I forget what it's called right now. You see them everywhere. They're the RV rentals. my kids came with us to go pick it up so that way they could go for the ride from the RV place to our house. Everybody was so excited. We pack up the RV, and then we were going to leave the next morning. And that night, it turned out that there was some really bad rainstorms that had been happening, and the water had issues, and essentially the water supply, because of the storms, they weren't able to have clean drinking water at the site of the festival, and the band wasn't able to get in enough drinking water for people to supplement the fresh water that was supposed to be on hand. So we're ready to leave the next morning. People are already there. Like you could have gone the night before. We just couldn't go until the next morning because of childcare or whatever. We have the car all packed and ready to go, and we find out that the festival was canceled. Like they had to send everybody home, and it was known as like the big curveball festival is what we all called it. And we had this RV, they wouldn't take it back. So we had it for like a long weekend, and we already had childcare arranged for our kids. I think our kids already like were one of our parents or whatnot. And we were all depressed for a few minutes, and we're like, you know what, this is a curveball. When life throws you lemons, you can decide, are you going to be like a sour person that's miserable about it and unhappy, or can you turn that lemon into lemonade? And life threw us this thing that we weren't anticipating, and we built our own little life ramp, right? Our own little boat, known as an RV. And we ended up driving up to Vermont for the weekend anyway, even though it was supposed to be New York. And we had an awesome weekend. We had so much fun, and we created stories that we'll never forget. And I'm sure we would have had stories we never would have forgot also at the festival. But anyway, you get the point. You can resist the things that life throws your way, or you can build your boat, go with the flow, and see what happens. And maybe something better happens in the long run. So for me, that's what this is all about. Okay, so your Dharma talk, story time is done. And now I want to get into the part of class where we use a phrase over and over again to drop as breadcrumbs throughout the class at different points to help your students come back to the idea of the myth of Vishnu's fish. So it's not just like a story at the beginning, but you keep reminding them of this throughout the class. You follow the breadcrumbs, then you stay on course. The course is the theme. So some phrases I like to use, and you can come up with your own, but these are ones I like. Let your breath be your guide. I just like the fish. Your breath's now your guide. Balance strength with trust. Ride the currents of uncertainty. That's a nice one. Or imagine each pose as a boat steadying you through the waves. Or adapt, flow, and trust the wisdom within you. Surrender to the process, knowing you are always supported, or maybe even just like surrender to the flow. What comes up for you when you don't have the control of where this class is going? And so maybe in this class, like let's chat about how we bring this theme alive. Maybe it's something like I tend to tell my students what we're working on or working toward and give them an idea, but maybe I don't for this class. And I tell them, we're going to do yoga and you're going to see what comes your way. And how does it feel in that level of uncertainty? Can you trust the situation? Can you feel safe despite not knowing what's to come? But then like for a peak pose, I might do fish pose. You could do a supported fish if it's a more chill class, or maybe even boat pose. So there's different options, but they relate back to the theme, right? Fish, because obviously Matsya is fish. Boat pose, because Manu has to build a boat to survive. So either of those really work. And then there's also a mudra, a hand gesture called Varuna mudra, when your pinky and thumb touch and the other three fingers stay upright and extended, almost like a peace sign, but the ring finger stays up instead of tucking it in, or, like number 3, whatnot. Or if you're Jewish and you ever went to Hebrew school, whenever they'd want you to be quiet, they'd put up this fingers like this mudra, because it stands for shin for sheket, and sheket is quiet, whatever. But here it's the gesture for water, for fluidity and adaptability. So it makes sense. It's a mudra that helps you feel that fluidity and adaptability in your life. So it's a nice one to throw in, whether it's in meditation during class or in certain postures, you could throw it in as well and use it. Some quotes you might want to intersperse throughout the class. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. That's John Kabat-Zinn. He's the father of mindfulness, if you will. And I think he's really talking about you can't stop the wave of your thoughts and your distraction, but you can learn to surf amongst that distraction and mind stuff. Or another one by Martin Luther King. Faith is taking the first step even when you can't see the whole staircase. right? He didn't know what was going to happen when he built the ship, or what was, trusting in this giant fish. Didn't know what was going to happen, but he trusted in it. Or an anonymous quote of, when the storms of life hit, anchor yourself in trust. There's like a nice mantra. You could do Om Matsya Namaha, which is salutations to Matsya, the guide and protector. And if you use that mantra, that phrase, you can ask your students to reflect on what guides you and helps you feel protected, because not everybody's going to have the same thing. And it's meant to be a practice of self-study. So these myths are helping us tap into a lesson, and then we use that lesson to help us study ourselves. Swadhyaya. How do we integrate the lessons from this story? And so in this one, it's asking your students to really reflect on what guides them and what helps them feel protected, especially in times of uncertainty. And if you're into visualizations for meditations, you could ask your students to visualize themselves on a boat guided by a calm, wise current. Imagine the challenges of life as waves. And with each inhale and exhale, feel yourself navigating these waves with trust and ease. It's just a nice little visualization for them. All right, so let's wrap up the class now that we talked about all of that. Here is what I would say as a reverse Dharma talk, the closing of the class. As you come out of Shavasana and prepare to leave your mat, take the lesson of Matsya with you. Life will always bring uncertainty. As much as we try for it not to happen, it will. But within you lies the wisdom and strength to navigate it. Trust in your inner guidance and remain adaptable. And know that even in the stormiest waters, there is a current leading you to safety. Ask yourself, what challenges am I facing now? How can I approach them with trust and openness, knowing that I am always guided and supported? Okay, yogis, now if you like this yoga story time, let's find a way for you to bring the theme alive in your own voice, in your own practice and teaching. The story of Matsya, Vishnu's fish, teaches us to trust in guidance and remain adaptable through the life storms. May this myth inspire you to face uncertainty with courage and grace, both on and off the mat. Then please reach out to me on all the different platforms, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or email, and let me know how it lands. I'm here to support you, fellow yoga teacher, in your class preparation and delivery. So let me know how I can be the most support to you. Please tune in next time for a new myth for inspiration for your classes. And don't forget to check out the course, Theme Weavers Academy, Crafting Impactful Classes. So excited about it. I hope that you love it. Please let me know. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and enroll. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week with a new myth and modern inspiration to bring to your practice and your teaching. See you next time.